Hey there guys, it's Rick Utzer here with AirgunWeb, where we tell you the facts, not fluff, and this is your home for old school airgun reviews. Well, today we're doing something different. I never do this, guys. Well, seldom do I ever do this, where I take two completely different guns and compare the differences between them. But that's what we're gonna do. These guns are like, right now they're the kings of that very aggressively priced PCP that's full of features and power and all kinds of good stuff. And I bet you guys want to know what are the distinctions between the two, really what makes one different than the other. And let me just say this right up front. Both of these guns are awesome. These guns are going to resonate with different shooters. What kind of shooter are you? Well, you may want some features that the Venturi Avenger Woodstock has, or you may prefer some of the features that the Gauntlet 2 has. The thing is, you need to know what those are. You need to know what the differences are, what the similarities are, and that's what this video is all about. Now, we got two parts coming to you. In this video, we're doing all the classroom stuff. I've done crony tests. I've done DB tests. I've done trigger pull tests. I've done shot count, weighed the doggone things. I've done all of that stuff, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at some of those the things that make them different and also the things that make them the same. Now, for this test, let me just tell you how we did all of this. I got the same exact scope, same exact rings. We shot on the same rest, on the same day, in the same environments. We did as similar as we could make things. Even the idiot behind the trigger. I mean, we had the same thing going on for both guns to try and really see objectively what the differences are. So let's talk about these first off. So the other thing I want to say is that both of these guns have versions that came before them. So the Gauntlet 2 had the Gauntlet 1. The Venturi Avenger Woodstock had the Venturi Avenger. Now, there's a lot more differences between the Gauntlet 1 and the Gauntlet 2, the G1 and the G2. The differences here are really the stock. I don't want to look at comparing these to their previous iterations. I want to look at comparing this exact model with this exact model. So that's really what we're going to focus on. So let's start with just overall design and the aesthetics of the gun. Now, they're going to talk to different shooters. I like a chunky wood stock. I like the way it feels. I like the stability it gives me. So I like a wood stock. I also like a synthetic stock if it's done well. And Umarex, in my opinion, did this stock well. Whether you like the design or not, that's your thing. But as far as the quality of the stock, the material, how solid it feels, it's very, very good. Now, the Venturi has a pick rail here underneath. Comes standard, you just got it. It has a nice swivel stud at the back, so this really comes ready that way. Now, the G2 doesn't have a rail, although you see I got a rail here, but it does have M-LOK channels, so besides just a rail, you can actually add accessories very easily here. You can't do that on the Venturi. So if you wanted to run a light or laser or some other accessory up here, this is set up to do that. You just get your M-LOK rails and you're good to go. I think that's pretty cool. Now, they both have the scope rail that takes either weaver or dovetail. Both of these rails I would have preferred if they had been milled as part of the receiver, so they're just one solid piece, but that would have cost a lot more money and it wasn't practical. So both of these rails are actually screwed into the receiver. And I mention that because before you go mount an optic, especially if you have a heavier optic, this is kind of a chunky, heavy optic we're running today, you're going to want to make sure these are tight. Both of them, out of the box, needed to be tightened up. So be aware of that. You've just got Allen screws right down the center here. Just make sure they're good and tight before you go and put your optic on it. For optics, what we're running, just so you guys know, both of them are running the Vantage side focus, first focal plane, 4-16, the Vantage 30 wide angle. So the scopes are about a $460, $470 price point, which I think is really just about right for these guns. The guns are running right around 400 and some change. So price point between the two guns themselves is pretty much the same right now. So I ran the same scopes, same mounts, all that stuff. Now, on the weight, if you like a lighter gun, then the Avenger is probably gonna speak to you a little bit. It's 8.5 pounds with the scope. The G2, Gauntlet 2, is 10 pounds with the scope. So this is definitely lighter. This is also, this is also shorter. So we talk about length. The Avenger is 43.5 inches. The Gauntlet is 47 inches. So a little bit heavier, a little bit longer, a little bit lighter, a little shorter. That's just, what do you prefer? Okay. Trigger pull. We got on the trigger, we used the Lyman trigger gauge, and we did some trigger pull tests. We did, shot it several times and kind of took a general average between each of these shots. And I'll tell you that the Venturi trigger is more consistent and a little bit nicer. Just, I mean, call that objective, subjective, whatever. I find this trigger a little nicer and it was more consistent. So the differences between each test was basically negligible. The Avenger gave me about a 1 pound trigger pull. The Gauntlet 2 also has about a 1 pound trigger pull, but it went from like 14.5 ounces to 1.2 ounces. So it had more variations between my tests. So maybe less consistent feeling, but the pull weight average was about the same. They're both about a pound, maybe a pound and some change. Noise level. Well, this is a big one, right? First thing, let me say this. Both guns have third-party options to make them quieter, okay? Now, I'm looking at these out of the box, right? I'm not trying to add anything else to these to make them different. I'm just, you know, as I took them out, that's what we're doing. I will get to how I did set up the reg and that kind of thing. But besides that, as far as noise goes, I'm not going to add anything to try and make it better. It just are the numbers we got and how we tested it. Now, the way I test dB numbers is, and I know you guys have been wanting me to actually test 2 positions. Well, I did that today on these guns because I wanted to show the difference between 5 feet, which is mechanical and shot noise, and 45 feet, 15 yards, which is going to be probably more just shot noise. Well, let's take a look first. Let's take a look at the G2. Now the G2, right up close, around 5 feet, was 104.7 approximate average. So that's what we were getting. You might think, oh my gosh, that's loud. Well, it's that fast. So it's really not a sustained loudness, but it is a little bit of a, crack is the wrong word. It's got some volume to that shot noise. The Avenger had more. So when you're shooting this, and I noticed this today as we shot this a lot, both of these guns a lot, and I would switch between the guns, the Avenger is noticeably louder. How much louder? Well, on the meter, we're looking at 107.8 approximate average. So it's louder. It's noticeably louder than the G2. And it's a different type of sound. This is more of a crack sound, and that's more of a thud. And I wish I could describe that better. I wish my mics would pick it up better, just they don't. But if you shoot these two side by side, you're gonna really know what I'm talking about. Now, when you back up to 45 feet, things really change, okay? So that 104 for the G2 drops way down to 88.3, an approximate average. So that is much, much quieter. That is, 45 feet away, this is not gonna sound very loud at all. It is very, very tame. And also you see the same sort of drop, although it's still gonna be louder because it starts off louder, but the Avenger dropped to 95.3 dB. So it's well under 100 dB. So there's a big difference once you sort of get away from the guns. So that means if you're in your backyard, you have a quiet pellet trap. If your neighbors are 45 to 60 feet away, you're really not gonna be, well, you really shouldn't be unless they're super sensitive, would not be bothering them. So, that's all gonna be, you're gonna have to figure that out with your environment. What kind of surroundings you have. Do you have things that are going to amplify the sound? All that kind of stuff is going to matter. But realistically, just 45 feet away, and these levels really, really drop as far as the noise. Again, if you want to make either of these quieter, there's third-party options already available to just add to these that you could make these guns quieter. So that part of it is really not a hard thing to deal with. But out of the box, G2 is definitely quieter. Now, one of the things that is very different in the mechanics of the gun, the Avenger has a side lever. I really like a side lever. You have a mechanical advantage when you're cocking this gun that makes it much easier to work. When you're shooting a lot of shots, it actually does sort of matter that ease does help. By contrast, the Gauntlet has just a bolt. There's no mechanical advantage here. Now, they put this big chunky handle on here, which really helps with cocking the gun. I've had other bolt guns that I struggled, and excuse me, this gun we shot, when we get to shot count, you'll understand why. A lot. I mean, hundreds of rounds we shot today with this thing over the last couple days, really, and no misfeeds, okay? For a bolt gun, a rear bolt gun or a side bolt gun that's got a heavy hammer spring, it's not unusual to not get it all the way cocked back, and then you actually got a double feed or something like that can happen. Not a single problem did we have with this. They did a very good job with the G2. Even though it is a bolt, they did a very good job making it easier to cock. I don't know how else to say it. I still would prefer a side lever. Okay, so if pulling on that bolt's going to wear you out, or it's just not anything you like, the side lever on this is really, really nice. So you have those. There's a big distinction there. Okay, let's get to shot count, because this is where we start seeing some real separation. The Venturi Avenger has a regulator, very, very cool. What's even better is that you can adjust it. So the way you adjust this is you drain it, you set your reg to minimum, and then you turn the reg until you're at the pressure you want. Now, I've shot the Avengers a lot, so I know they come from the factory at 2,900 PSI on the reg, which is just wasting a ton of air. You don't get any velocity advantage really past about 2,400 PSI on this gun in 25 caliber. So if I left it at 2,900, I would not get as many shots because I'm going to fall off the reg that much sooner or more quickly. So I did adjust the reg on this. I set it to about 2,500 PSI, give it a little bit of headroom in case it, for whatever reasons, wanted to give me that little push. But really, once I hit 24, that's where the velocity just flattened out. I'm using the Mark II heavies. They're 33.95 grain. That's a heavy 25 cal pellet, but these guns can actually push those. And again, in my testing with both of these guns, they really like those heavy, those Mark II heavies. So that's how I set this up, and then I went to shooting in the chronograph. Well, I have my phone here, which has all the numbers, and we will be able to put like a little video of all of that stuff happening, which was pretty awesome, because what we did on both guns is we filled them to full. We'll get to that fill pressure in a second. We filled them to full and then just kept shooting until it fell off the reg. This gun fills to 300 bar, which is great for like the hill compressor. It tops out at 300 bar. The G2 takes 4,500 PSI. We're gonna get to what makes this special here in a second. But this at 300 bar, we got 32 shots on the reg. I mean, maybe 30 shots really on the reg, and the last two sort of started to fall off a bit. But in that, the extreme spread was 27 with a standard deviation of 6. The average was 829, which gives us an average energy of about 51 foot-pounds. It's 50.96 foot-pounds of energy. So when you're looking at this gun, that's 32 shots on the reg with a reasonable spread and very, very small standard deviation. Now that is from start to end. If you like took a little off the front and a little off the back, you would see that shrink. But I wanted to give us an accurate look at what this should be able to do if you're in the field. How many mags can you get? You're gonna get 4 mags at this power setting with those pellets, okay? Now, when we jump over to the G2, Umarex put a huge bottle on this thing. It's a 24-inch bottle. So that bottle is pushing 4,500 PSI. I think it's regged to 2,100-ish, 21 or 22. Forgive me for not knowing that exact number. That thing is amazing. So we just started shooting, and we started shooting. In fact, we shot and ran out of chip on the camera. We had to stop and switch the chip and keep going. We shot 96 shots on the reg with this gun. Now here's what's amazing. The extreme spread was also 27 feet per second. The standard deviation was 5. So we're talking about this had a slightly better standard deviation, 3 times the shots, okay? So this had 32 shots. We got 96 shots on the reg with this gun, and the same performance out of the reg. Now, I think that if you're looking at the same performance, I mean, if I just said, hey, they both had 27 foot per second extreme spread and a standard deviation of 5 or 6, okay. But if I told you this got 32 shots, but this got 96 shots with the same numbers, I'm telling you that's huge. That means that from the front of your fill to the end of your reg, or when you're going to fall off the reg, you can go take this out hunting, and you're going to, I mean, if you miss, it's going to be you, because this thing was just awesome. What energy were we getting with that shot count? So average velocity across those 96 shots was 846 feet per second, and that gives us 53.08 foot-pounds. So more shots, just a fraction margin of error, better consistency, right? But 3 foot-pounds more energy. So we're looking at, we're talking, well, 2 foot-pounds more energy. This has got more power, just a little bit more velocity, a little bit more power. Now, what does that mean on the range? Well, I have something interesting really to talk to you guys about on that aspect, because there was a difference between these guns when shooting, specifically when you got past 50 yards. Well, we did some shooting on the bench, and that's going to be our next video. So be sure to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified when the next video drops, because we took both of these guns, shot them at 50, 75, and 100 yards. How'd they do? Well, you're going to have to catch the next video to find out. My name is Rick Utzer here with AirgunWeb, where we tell you the facts, not fluff. Thanks for watching.